In this episode we faced what definitely turned out to be the most difficult challenge of the series so far. And if I wasn't already worried, let me tell you that now I most definitely am. But I am also more excited than ever. And let me promise you this, no matter how hard it gets, we won't stop until we see Mr. BlindQuest with this beautiful cape on his strong shoulders. Wait, hang on, what happened? Can we put that up on the screen? I just got word that something very weird is happening in the Draynor Manor. It appears that there have been a robbery in Draynor Manor of a very valuable oil can. And here on your screen right now we have the CCTV footage directly from the crime scene of how an unknown suspect entered and robbed the oil can. We are still unsure of exactly what happened, but we will get to the bottom of this. So stick around and we will discover together exactly how this happened in today's episode of BlindManMode. This is BlindManMode. Say hello to Mr. BlindQuest, who will be taking on one of RuneScape's most classic challenges, obtaining the quest cape, while being almost completely blind. No, Mr. BlindQuest, watch out, where are you going? Come back this way quickly. After getting lost in the forest stumbling home from the pub late at night, Mr. BlindQuest finds himself in front of the huge Draynor Manor, with a woman who is asking him to help find her husband. The woman says that she and her husband got lost in the large forest as well, and her husband went into the manor to look for help. And if there is one thing that Mr. BlindQuest understands, it is getting lost, so of course he agrees to help. And after searching the entire ground floor, the only thing that Mr. BlindQuest found was some poison, which he picked up as it might come in handy later. Mr. BlindQuest has heard chatter around the nearby villages about the manor being haunted, but after having passed a very long time already in the manor, he had not seen any signs of any haunting, especially not any ghosts. Mr. BlindQuest found himself stumbling around the second floor looking for some fish food that he thought he could smell. And when he finally thought that he was getting close, it was almost like the fish food just disappeared from right in front of him. Almost as if someone would be rude enough to just go and pick it up right when he was about to pick it up. Which is definitely something that Mr. BlindQuest would never do to anyone. Finally finding the fish food, Mr. BlindQuest was ready to try and make his way upstairs and see if Ernest could be found up there. After making it to the third floor and once again stumbling around for a while, Mr. BlindQuest finally makes it into the room with a man in some kind of weird lab coat. And he learns that due to some kind of failed experiment, Ernest is now the chicken who's in the room with Mr. BlindQuest, and in order to turn him back, he needs to find 3 pieces to fix the machine. Making his way back downstairs, Mr. BlindQuest goes searching in the garden with the only tools that he will need, some fish food and some poison. But as Mr. BlindQuest's father always used to tell him, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Poison a lake and in minutes you can do the work of an entire day. So with this piece of wisdom in mind, Mr. BlindQuest went in search for the fountain. And after stumbling around for a very long time in what seemed to be a garden consisting entirely of dead trees, Mr. BlindQuest finally found the fountain. And just as his father had promised him, everything can be solved with some fish food and some poison, because after throwing the poisoned fish food into the fountain, Mr. BlindQuest found the first of the 3 components that he needed to fix the machine. And after doing a few laps of the house and the garden, Mr. BlindQuest finally found the key needed to open the room with the skeleton, where he needed to find the second component for the machine. And after finding the key and making his way back into the manor, he found the room with the skeleton, entered the room and found the second component without too much trouble and managed to make it out again. Now all that remained to do was to make it into the basement where the third and final component could be found. Which brings us to our very first quest puzzle on the account. And quest puzzles can be some of the most frustrating things to do in RuneScape, and that's with a guide. I will be doing all of the puzzles without exceptions, without using any guides. And that's without mentioning doing it in the darkness where I can barely see a few tiles in front of me. Which for this Ernest the Chicken puzzle meant that every time that I flipped a lever, I would have to physically make my way to every single one of the doors to check if they were open and closed. And if the door that I wanted to open hadn't opened, I would have to make my way back to the lever, flip it again, make my way to a new lever, flip it and see if it had opened this time. And all of these movements I would have to make in the darkness, where I can promise you that I did get lost a lot of times, and sometimes even for entire minutes trying to make it back to lever A without having any idea where the lever could be found. But it was very fascinating to feel how with time I started to get a mental idea of how the room was built and where exactly the levers were placed. So sometimes when I wanted to get back to lever A, for example, I would be able to walk more or less direct to where I had learned that the lever would be placed. And I have to give a huge thanks to the dev who designed this puzzle and decided to place the names of the levers in the right click option in game, as without that I would have had to guess every single time that I wanted to flip a lever which lever it would be. So all in all, this entire puzzle took me well over an hour, and therefore I will not be able to share the entire gameplay with you in the video, as even at 16 times sped up it will take well over 5 minutes, and that's a very long clip. So how did I end up completing this puzzle? It wasn't only through sheer luck. I did make up some kind of a system, and this system was a coherent and well organized description of every action that I took and its consequences, typed into the in-game chat in an organized fashion. If you have been paying close attention to the clips on the screen, you might have caught bits and pieces, but to make it easier for all of us, I have collected them all here on the screen. I do apologize for the quality of these screenshots, but during the celebration of finally completing the puzzle, I did end up deleting the chat by mistake, so I had to get all of these photos from the recording. So if anyone would like to take a closer look at my journey into madness, go ahead and press pause. I wouldn't recommend it. If not, let's get back into the gameplay and take a look at when I finally did end up completing the puzzle. And after pulling levers and opening doors the entire day, Mr. BlindQuest finally went to check the last door one last time, and it opened. And he could finally get the final and third component to fix the machine and hopefully get Ernest back to his human form and reunite him with his wife. And that's Ernest the Chicken completed, and quite possibly our biggest challenge so far. And as always, let's enjoy one of these very beautiful old school RuneScape cutscenes. If you get close enough to let your nose touch the monitor, you might be able to see this beautiful animation in slow motion of Ernest being transformed back into a human. And you will be getting the full BlindManMode experience, as that's pretty much how I'm playing as well. But a huge quest completion getting Ernest the Chicken done shows that although it was very painful and very frustrating, it is possible to do some of these puzzles in the dark, although I wouldn't recommend it. So 4 very hard earned quest points and 300 gold, and for now gold is always very much appreciated, as my cash stack is, as you can see, not very big. So leaving the very spooky Draynor Manor, we are now back in the light of day in Falador, where Mr. BlindQuest has heard that Sir Amic Vase is in need of a brave adventurer. And all that he was told to bring was a bronze medhelm, an iron chain body and a cabbage. So Mr. BlindQuest thought that it would be some kind of a costume party, and since he hadn't been told anything about alcohol, it would probably have a free bar as well. But to Mr. BlindQuest's big surprise and great disappointment, this was not the case. He was being asked to infiltrate something called the Black Knight's Fortress, which seemed very dangerous and not very fun. But having already spent a lot of his recent earnings on the costume, he figured he might as well do it. Maybe there would be some kind of reward at the end. So he made his way towards the White Wolf Mountain, where the fortress should be located. And I don't see how sending a blind man to stumble around on a mountain could go wrong. Finally finding the mountain and getting close to the fortress, he puts on his disguise. And with 5 whole shrimps and a lot of confidence, he was very ready to conquer the fortress. But before he got even close, the Black Knight saw through his disguise and he had to go running away as fast as he could. Unfortunately, his disguise had not worked as well as he had hoped for. We will probably never know why. A theory might be that the Black Knights would have noticed if there was a blind guard who was walking into every single tree on the way, trying to get to the fortress. But as I said, that would only be a theory. In the meantime, Mr. BlindQuest had used his trusted home teleport to get back on familiar ground. He might have been a little beaten up, but not discouraged at all, because Mr. BlindQuest knew exactly what would help him get past the Black Knights. And shockingly, the solution that he had in mind involved alcohol. So he made it to Draynor village, where he knew from experience that he could buy some very cheap wine, which would surely help with the whole Black Knight Fortress situation. So with his backpack now full of wine, he figured he would make his way through Falador on the way to the Black Knight's fortress to see if he couldn't find one of those pesky imps that he had been looking for earlier. And having learned from previous failures, this time it would probably go a lot better, right? Right? And knowing that right about now he would be in the middle of imp territory, he started using his world famous blind imp catching strategy. And in another case of what must have been very bad luck, there weren't any imps nearby, although he knew that this normally was an imp hotspot. At least he didn't catch any imps, which must have meant that there weren't any imps nearby, right? Mr. BlindQuest does see himself as somewhat of an expert in catching imps. He does indeed see himself as so much of an imp catching expert that he started his own imp catching business, which I promised that I would promote here. So if you have issues with completing the imp catcher quest, or have an imp infection in your house, reach out to Mr. BlindQuest and he will take care of your problem. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get back into our story. Once again, Mr. BlindQuest is getting close to the Black Knight's fortress, and this time he comes more prepared with a backpack full of wine. And once again, the Black Knights attack him, but this time he responds in the only way a normal person would do, by chugging jug of wine after jug of wine. And while drinking wine with one hand, he uses the other hand to locate a door and open it, and suddenly he finds himself inside. We will now be following Mr. BlindQuest while he expertly maneuvers the Black Knight's fortress by climbing up and down ladders and up and down stairs while resisting hits from the angry Black Knights. By using years of practice of taking hits by walking into different objects. Until he suddenly hears some voices coming out of a hole in the wall. And Mr. BlindQuest heard the witch talking about her evil plans, so he knew exactly what to do and why he needed the cabbage. So he made his way back through the ladders and back through the stairs in search of the room above where he had heard the witch talking. And I gotta say that it's very impressive how Mr. BlindQuest keeps going after having chugged over 15 jugs of wine. So while still being badly beaten by the Black Knights, he makes it down to the ground floor. And through a mix of his disguise and some expertly acting from Mr. BlindQuest, he makes it into the eastern wing of the fortress where he wants to be. And after some trouble with finding the ladder, he finally makes it to the room above the witch and her secret weapon. So let's enjoy what might have been my favorite cutscene that we have been blessed with so far on this account. And some people might say, but that's just a black screen. But that would be like calling a Picasso just some colored squares. But what in my eyes makes this cutscene so incredible is how the color of onyx black and deep dark grey are used to create some intriguing perspectives. And the sense of urgency and drama that you can feel in the use of charcoal and jet black. And don't even get me started on the use of licorice to end out this cutscene, or I will be talking about its brilliance for the rest of the day. So with this exceptional cutscene to round off the quest, Mr. BlindQuest just needs to make it back to Falador for his reward. So after having home teleport to Lumbridge, Mr. BlindQuest thought that he would make it through the South Falador entrance, as it is an imp hotspot. And as they say, third time's the charm. And using the famous tornado mouse strategy, something incredible happened. If you look at my slowed down POV, you will see how Mr. BlindQuest finally finds his first imp. And to what I am sure is a great surprise for all of us, the tornado mouse strategy does have a few issues. Mr. BlindQuest did actually manage to hover over the imp twice, but he moved the mouse so quickly that once the imp has walked out of his crosshair, he simply could not find the imp again, although he did his very best to try and track it down. So after what actually ends up being the most ridiculous clip so far, as the imps have already walked directly under Mr. BlindQuest like 3 times and he hasn't managed to find a single one, he would have to give up his hunt for his first imp kill once again. And let me remind you that each beat is actually a 1 in 25 and I will need all 4. So once I manage to get a single imp kill, I won't even be close to having all 4 beats which are necessary to complete the quest. Which is why I keep walking through this area in the hope that I will find some way to start killing these imps. But let's get back on track with the quest, as Mr. BlindQuest was heading to Falador to get rewarded for his trouble in the Black Knight's fortress. And having made his way to Falador, Mr. BlindQuest is ready to accept his reward. But after a long time of waiting, I'm actually not sure that Sir Amic Wace wants to actually give him the reward. Seriously, is this supposed to take this long? But in the end, I guess that Sir Amic Wace did give up, and he paid 2,500 coins and 3 quest points, which is an excellent reward once again, as any coin that we can come by is very much appreciated at this point. If you made it this far into the video and you liked today's episode and you would like to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe. Today we got our first little taste of what an old school RuneScape puzzle means on this account. And this was only one of the free to play puzzles contained to a small basement in the Draynor Manor. So although I am very proud that I managed to do the puzzle blind and without using any guides, I am also very scared, as this was like a small appetizer of some of the puzzles that old school RuneScape has to offer. But I can't lie, it is going to be very exciting. So thank you very much for following along on this journey, and I will be back with the next episode very soon.